welcome to an exciting episode of Riding Through the Unknown. I am joined today on this Sunday afternoon with a guest who is phenomenal, who is amazing. He has helped me, and I am so glad he's able to come on, and I'm hoping that information he has to share with us will help you all as well. I know he probably needs no introduction because he's so big in the community, but I'm going to graciously give him one anyway. I present to you all the one, the only, the amazing, talented, gifted Sean Bond.
Wow, thank you for that introduction. That's awesome. Thank you for having me on the show. I'm excited for the different topics you bring up, and that intro was awesome.
Well, you're welcome. Well earned. And I have to say that I looked at all the stuff when I was putting your bio together to advertise this, that you are into modalities that I have never heard of being done, like DNA reading. How does that work? And
Thank
what
you.
got you started with that?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I love esoteric knowledge, so I like diving deep into the secrets of the universe and myself and what's involved. And every time I stumble across a secret, it's beautiful. And it's like remembering and knowing more of myself and which connection to everything. Is everyone is connected, so it's like the Big Bang. Everyone's a part of the same tree branch of energy. I got involved in DNA reading. I put a piece together a plethora of abilities one after another. Like my empathy got crazy powerful and sensitive to feel everything deeply. Though that was first at a torturous period in time because things would dump negative energy on me. So it was like, but then I balanced it and I got it to where I don't get overwhelmed by anything negative anymore. And now I can sensitively tune into energy biophotons that come at me from a person's body. They have the blueprint in each biophoton coming off of them for their entire genetics history. And I go through different modes of authority and earning through energetic spiritual mystery schools to gain authority to reading people just off the cuff faster. It took a while in like how much to translate, and then I after practice get it down to an instant, and then trained in knowingness tech with the heart electromagnetic field truth meditation, and like psychometry if you were reading into objects but for people and places and all that. And yeah, now so that would be into the light body or the genetic records of a person, but then getting into different files as well, such as their soul history, their spirit history, and Akashic record, and then going further into macrocosmic authority of knowingness. So genetics, a lot of aspects in the senses training, such as biofeedback in many ways, clairaudience, clairvoyance, empathy, clairknowing, training all those systems so I can just zone in and ask the questions really quickly and get a bunch of data streaming to me. And then also I set up systems to where it's like an automatic system of what data I'm most interested in first, and then in order downloaded to me.
So that's really cool. And I'm curious because I was taught, like, going through doing like timeline therapy and other modalities where you learn from the past, you put it in the present, you can alter DNA, like alter everything about yourself. So how does that impact your DNA readings? Have you ever read for someone and then you're like, wait, this is are you the same person? Because this is not what I read the last time.
Interesting. I like your questions. They're deep. Time gets involved in pretty much everything because it's like the medium for integration of experience and knowledge and wisdom for an experience and observation of a reality in objects' rotation and their relation and relativity to each other. And when you're going up the mystery school of time, you get less limits on you in time. So time is one and is all changeable. So the past is less set in stone. So you do get to find things happen that are anomalies in the timeline to the DNA technology I have found, including paradoxes that are like like a time wound or hairball of data and drama that's waiting to be resolved, that's held in people. If you're doing either, there's various layers of time travel, whether it be consciousness time travel and retrocausal psychokinesis, or the technological stuff that goes into the projects and military ops, such as what is built upon by Tesla Vortal tunnel technology and other ET species that tapped into that technology. That effect, like as an example, there's a lot of jerks that are negative ET species that are trying to control humanity because it has a big effect on the future, as we're a super hybrid that contains most species in the galaxy in our genetic library. And we're kind of traumatized and held back and limited quite heavily from inheriting all the drama of all those species. So it like compresses our potential that we're born with, but the greater long-term potential is enormous if you're able to get past and transcend all the blocks, because you can take all the cool technology and abilities that each species have and combine them together and have less limits. So they like to tap into it in a parasitic way and control and orient the direction of humanity. I find them quite often trying to go back in time, such as at events in history that people will know as like the Anunnaki tampering and genetic augmentation of a species that was on Earth that we are previously. That's just like a component of our genetic melting pot. And then them adding their genetics and a whole bunch of other genetics to us. And at that time, there's a lot of species going back in time and trying to add a bunch of crap to it to make it easier to control us or influence us towards their agenda, or like emotional influence, mental influence, behavior, as well as evil factions trying to overwhelm us with different types of energy and links to a dark genetic line that allows them to steal and overwhelm us with evil, because there's like a tug of war in our species of how much percentage of the population is evil versus good versus neutral and awakening, if that makes sense. I don't know if that fully answered your question, if you want to go more into it.
It did, and it actually raised an interesting question when you were talking about time and everything. Is I've had quite a few experiences to where I feel like I was pulled out of time, and so I'm wondering if that leaves an impact. Like, is that like something that you see and you're like, huh, you have missing time here where for like say 15 minutes, but it's like it's missing, but it's because you just weren't there. And it's like, do you see that, or does that leave any impacts on what you do?
Yes. Okay. So yeah, that leaves impacts and impressions and evidence, which is what I go into, because I am very evidence-based, and I build off of psionics, which is a term for a military science that accumulates the untold potential of humanity in mind over matter, in psychic abilities and different psychokinetic abilities that have been demonstrated around the planet, such as chi, Veril, ki, prana, and different siddhis and superpowers that have existed. So pull out of time, Yeah, I love time, so it's one of my favorite types of energy. There's a temporal body in the person. This has even been soft disclosed, and I was kind of a little bit like I expect it now, but it's fun to when shows go into it and they use the terms that I used like 20 years ago, um, or 10 years ago. So like temporal body is a concept of so bodies are layers of filing systems over top the regular physical body and energy that are programmed for certain abilities, intentions, and missions that can be used as like a operating system computer, but in the holographic field and electromagnetic field spectrum. And if you understand electromagnetic fields, you can use them as technology, which is including creating, generating energy and how magnets work and making systems. And that's just like the basics, but like what the body can do even more fully when you get them under your control. So temporal body, that was also soft disclosed in a show called Loki, where it's like a temporal aura, where a mission of time energy. This is your own stamp, a mission of time. The science uses the term chronons to demonstrate uh, particles of time energy, but I'm not like fully invested in that word because it has to do with chronos, but whatever. Um, so that has a signature of your entire history in time, including an emission from your spirit and your soul, which is packed data from what you were doing previously before your incarnation into this body, which will inherit things like paradoxes, wounds, a timeline history of yourself and what you've been through, whether you were just going on a regular linear concept of time, or in between incarnations, you're pulled in and out and go to different realms or afterlife realms, or have compressed temporal dilated time where you're somewhere for a long period of time and then put back in as if you never left. That can happen also while you're physically here, which happens with the Milab programs of military abduction. As well as ETs do it all the time, because there's a rule on this planet that's ever increasing with ramifications and consequences for people, beings that take people out of their regular purpose and journey and the equation of the timeline that's being held together as a chocolate souffle for an agenda and goal. And if things mess with that too much, then it can interfere and cause consequences, and they get reprimanded for that. So they visit and abduct people in a way where it doesn't interfere with that by having them go off to wherever they're going to go, and then they come back as if they never left with memory wipes, so it doesn't interfere with their timeline currently. And that shows up for sure in both the temporal body, and depending on the experience, how long you're gone for, that goes in age with your consciousness increasing. There will be evidence emotionally, like especially if there's trauma or like there's war or conflict or fear, or you're meeting something that you've never met before. That will have like a growth orientation as well in the knowingness field of your mind, which will then spur thoughts that you've never thought before. And so mental, spiritual, and emotional aging. And then usually there's going to be a compartmentalized altar, which is stored in the soul, mind, ego aspect layer with amnesia barriers, or it's locked away until there's like a code initiating, unlocking it into the conscious mind, which, whether it's positive or negative, abduction or visitation, like an ET that's positive, like that's your soul family, if they visit you and they're like, oh, we got to do missions, there's reasons why we're here, and you're incarnating as human, and we're going to do those things, and then I'm going to put you back. And some of it might orient and influence you in the physical when you're back, as well as there are things you got to do in the unseen with us because of the talents that you may have that are unique. And there is a big growth, evolutionary spurring by being on the planet as well, and resilience. And sometimes you go somewhere and you got to train people, or you be off for like days, weeks, months, even years, or even I've seen people getting taken to the future, and it's usually it's a attempt to sync up the timeline with the past of what they're trying to work towards in a future timeline, which is never set in stone. There's a big tug of war voting on what manifests, but there's a goal that Earth wants and a bunch of the authorities, and they have a bigger pull than the rest of the populace. But and then the dark steals authority to try to pull it in their direction, because they also have a bunch of negative timelines from dark government groups that control the planet, etc. in the future. So there's a big timeline war, and sometimes you get taken and you're like, oh, like get information of the future, come back. Your physical, or mostly it's going to be your spiritual body. Once you're back and anchored in the past, like imagine a big ghost aspect of yourself that's a higher self doing the chess moves around the planet. Once it gets information of what the future's like and what problems they're facing and what you got to course correct towards, and you bring that back, then they're orienting back in time, the timeline, to get better and prevent those problems. There's so many other things that happen.
I'm curious because, like, they say, like, right now, like, if someone was to try and hypnotize and mind control you, they cannot force you to do something that goes against your core beliefs. Like, an example, I don't want to kill someone, so I can't be hypnotized or mind controlled to kill. Is that true, or have they found ways around that?
I like that. That's an interesting question. Not many people ask me about mind control. Okay, so a big thing to realize is that this planet is one of the most mind-controlled places ever. Because there's so many things, so many species, versions of us in the future that are in negative timelines. The government, species in inner Earth, omnidirectional fields, all this technology from ET species, inner Earth, the past, sometimes the like dark factions of things like older civilizations like Atlantis, which are pan-continental civilizations, attempting to control everything. And with controlling the collective consciousness of the planet, the mind of all the individuals, the field, cities, emissions from certain devices, as well as psionic influence of mind control. There's so many different types. And then the media, of course. So there's a lot of it. So they're never going to stop attempting to mind control people. The thing to work on is that we're essentially going to be by having all this mind control coming at us, we're becoming immune to it. So we're going to be very immune to it. So it's like, whatever. We're a very resilient species. We're becoming immune to most things. They're constantly bombarding us with stuff. Orientation to kill in mind control. I mostly see that in effect in Black Ops military abduction programs, Montauk, under places under New York, or underground bases and deep underground military bases, dumps for like Washington D.C. in the U.S. anyway. There other countries do it. China, I know, does it, and Russia. A lot of the bigger countries are very oriented to the psionic, having the psionics of remote influencing, remote viewing, remote spying, and if they can, remote death or assassination. which has been soft disclosed by quite a bit of people, and attempts to abduct people into these projects are real, and they're not good. They're not nice. I've had attempts to have things bring me into these, and I'm like, no, and I put a bunch of energy into stopping that. But it's not from, they keep trying. So if you, a death authority is highly sought after, but barely anyone earned, there is a bit of a disruption with the authority and the system of death on this planet, in where the evil that is invaded from the past, like I think catastrophes like fall of Atlantis, with big spiritual invasions, predators stealing, capturing, imprisoning, devouring gods of death, and then stealing their authority to cause death, and then a bunch of dark sorcerers doing rituals to capture parts and pieces from these authorities of death, force possess themselves or capture the being, or whatever way they invoke to steal the power, and then they use that to gain authority to cause death to their enemies. If it's a dark faction, they do it to, you know, they probably are mind controlled to think that they're protecting their country, and sometimes they are, which is like in the allowance of it. But yeah, a lot of the times it's just like anything that's a threat to their system of power. A lot of the times I see, and they're not necessarily earning it because they're stealing the abilities. If there is projects that are good that orient towards death, which sometimes they'll abduct very powerful people, and hire isn't really the right word because they take them against their will. Sometimes they pamper them, as like if it's a super soldier that has remote assassination effects, but a lot of times they'll abuse them and mind control them and try to use them without paying them. A lot of the time I see that, which can disrupt the ability if it's earned in the person and start to shut it down. So there's kind of a use it till it's used up type of thing going on with those people. I don't see that many people that know exactly what to do to keep the cultivated ability alive, because they don't really care and they just have their agendas and who they want to kill. But technically it could be done, which is what it should be being used to in protecting the planet from people that shouldn't exist anymore, that are abusing things, especially if they're stealing a high level of death energy, then or they're getting their own, like the reality, if it wants you dead, it's a natural occurrence, and so they have to subvert that and get that off them if they want to keep surviving. And a lot of negative people and dark sorcerers do deals with demons to subvert that. So there's like dark politicians and a system of abuse and control and signing their soul away that like has all this under a hierarchy. So your answer your question, yeah, it's happening. Yeah, there are things trying to prevent that. So there's like natural law and systems of positive goodness, a moral code enforcement that's trying to restore order to things like that. But it's a tug of war based on how much force each side has at any given point. And the dark wants to retain their power, and they have to keep stealing it or whatever.
All right, that makes sense. And I want to take a moment and step back to a word that you said earlier, and I'm curious how you explain it, because I've seen it explained many ways, and that's Veril. So, what exactly is Veril, and what is its purpose to you?
Vril? Okay. That's a German term in the Nazi SS. it's kind of a version of chi or prana. It's like this rare energy that you use as a fuel to run abilities. Usually they use it for psychic function, channeling, remote viewing, talking to ETs, and there's even an attempt to understand the physics of it in tapping to a rare subtle energy field to power spacecrafts. And it's the Germans' translation of rare subtle energy that they've understood through trading with ETs, based on ET physics that is beyond the comprehension of humanity, of how some of their ships fly and anti-gravity effects and greater functionality that they find in the ship or the ET species that has more words that is being translated to them, and then they make a whole secret society based on it, like with the Black Sun Society and the Veril Society, and there's other female male versions, and then a lot of stuff that's just the stuff that's peeking out in history in books and people that are disclosing on that, but it has a lot more history built on it in physics now. They claim that Veril comes from Black Sun. It's like a psychic sun, the source of all Veril, which, depending on who you talk to, can either be in the center of the earth, an overlay of the sun in a psychic body, the Saturn, the center of the galaxy. Or I think, in my interpretation of it, there's multiple black suns. Some that are actually black holes, some are the psychic body of a particular celestial object. So every and when I say object, celestial consciousness, the planets and the stars are alive. They have their own different layers of aura and emissions and spirituality, and so they have a psychic generation around in them. So they have a layer. So the Earth has that, the Sun has that, many other macrocosmic bodies have that of psychic emission. But depending on the cult member's belief, they'll be like, oh no, that's it, and then sometimes they fight over it. And it's not necessarily bad. Depending on the source of the psychic energy, and you can also make your own psychic body. So there's the Veril is just depending on who you get to define it. It could be multiple energetic bodies, filing system, but a lot of them are all hold together in missions from places like the solar plexus and the soul, and then they branch outward, and then they have different effects in the combinations of the energy in the circuit.
Okay, and thank you for that, because you hit the nail on the head, because I've heard it referred to as the individual, and then I heard it as being a fuel source for ships, and I'm like, wait, how can it be the same thing? And you just explained that really well, so thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, anytime. And yeah, you got great questions. And so there's, like, depending on who or the culture you ask, they'll like, oh, there's a accumulation of density of energy when you're bringing in energy and you're making your generators feel safe so they can generate their own energy. So there'd be, like, for prana is in Hindu, ki is in Japan, so you could have a ki body or a chi body or a chi field or a chi dantian where you store a bunch of that energy. So it's a lot of the same stuff, but you can finitely define it, each aspect, and then monitor each, and then get it to a high level of output so that you can start doing things with it.
Okay, and I'm wanting to take a moment, because you did something with me in a reading that I feel a lot of people ask me about, and I would love if you could help with. And that is when people say, like, attachments or something is interfering with them. You taught me a technique to block that, capture it. And so is that something you can share with everyone of how to something they can do to help protect themselves?
Let me think. Some components of that, if I don't give the full ability, then they're like kicking a bee's nest inside themselves, and I want them fully prepared for that if they were. So I'll do what doesn't. I'll give the information that doesn't kick the bee's nest. Yeah. Okay, how much can I say? So there's different pathways to enlightenment. Hinduism and Buddhism, it's about detachment, and there's like cords and all kinds of attachment that we are born into this world with. That is the illusion, the Maya, the limitation, the blocks, the aspects to overcome, the school, the things to transcend, the suffering, the heaviness, the understanding of polarity. And if you want to experience the best aspect of polarity or the balance, like if you're like wanting to experience full unlimited love to a higher and higher and higher degree, in order to, and it never stops growing as in this polarity structure, so you can keep getting better at different things like love or happiness or vision or knowing or understanding, all that kind of stuff. You have to understand the opposite, and that this world is permeant with the opposite from what it's gone through as a planet, as a gem in the galaxy that has lots of gifts and rewards and mysteries in it for people to discover. That it's a bright star that like, or light that attracts many dark things that try to invade and limit and control and use it for itself as like a harvesting farm. So we got to deal with the light and the dark and understand how they work. And the more anything you want to overcome or a problem that you're facing, you should write about it as much as you can in journaling. Understand it and the opposite, the thing you want, your goal, and what is the difference in bridging to your goal, and what you're facing, and what are the components in the physics of this thing you're facing to transcend. And then that can all be summed up as attachment, and what you're letting go of as you become your greatest, purest self. So some of that will be energy, wounds, constructs, types of conditions, states of reality, like pain, illness, suffering, negative emotions, perceptions, illusion, blindness, all that kind of stuff is the things to overcome to get to where you want to be in your greatest self. But there's also, everything is essentially still consciousness. So even if it's a low thing, like a little particle of energy, it's technically got a form of consciousness. And so that also goes up to the bigger forms of consciousness, which are also attachment or use attachment, because you have something they don't. And there's a lesson, and they're ultimately you anyway. They just forgot or insane or blocked off and limited and lack consciousness. And part of this world is mastering all those scenarios of what we're facing, including entities, dark beings, demons, whatever you want to call them, in the unseen, the astral, the spirit world, that is permeate with things, light, dark, and neutral. And pretty much everyone on the planet has attachments, whether it be in energy or limitation or karma or things for them to overcome based on their history of who they are and what they've been through. And if you were here at a certain period of time, pretty much everyone goes through certain big wounds that have affected the planet, and they're resolving it and turning all that pain into magic or empowerment or the opposite. And so there's, with each bad thing, that you can turn it into a good thing that empowers you. Every curse you're facing, it you can turn is a blessing in disguise, and vice versa. And the entity attachments go along with a lack in ourself too, because it's like filling a void. Imagine if you had parts stolen or pieces fractured or all that, and things reflecting or big negative vibrational wounds or trapped emotions inside. These track entities, because they can attach to those things. They can't attach to pure parts of our being. So as we transmute and learn the alchemical nature of our being and turning into, like, the lead consciousness into gold, then we're letting go of more of this stuff that weights us down and keeps us from a higher goal and the school of greater consciousness, and going back to what we've been in consciousness in other places, but doing it in a place that would make it super overpowered and be able to have a lot of authority everywhere else, and also in a super hybrid DNA technology, which makes a big difference. Imagine if some of the people here on this planet are from various star systems and planets, and have been throughout many places at once, and are in some of those places that they began at, that they spend a lot of time in, that they went through the entire school of that planet, essentially became godlike on that planet in managerial form. So now they're coming here to this bigger school to become an even greater version of, like, a creator, lower G God, fractal of the all. And they have components that they worked on that they're good at. They complete as a puzzle to this world, hired for what they're here for. There's so many aspects to the humanity. It's like a treasure trove that never keeps ending as you dig through it.
Okay, and Fast Ed has a really interesting question because I've never thought about it this way. But he says, are people possessed by neutral spirits? He thinks he's met one where it's way too nice to be a demon or dark energy and way too bad to be an angel or light energy.
Yeah, I mean, there would have to be a story behind that. If it's not just a random, well, it's never random. But you don't need to know everything about it as you heal yourself, kind of demon attachment. Yeah, there's different entity attachments that are neutral. So neutral can be in a lot of forms. So either they're not engaging in the game of light and dark and polarity, that they're trying not to be interfere or get involved with things. So they're usually not attaching to beings. But there could also be a neutrality where you're a balance of both light and dark, and you're attempting to balance those aspects of you, whether you did a large amount of like, let's say, a certain amount of light acts and deeds and throughout your journey, but you also did a certain amount of dark. So it's like a balance, attempt to balance that so that you are perceived as that, as well as you might actually demonstrate it. But you're still dealing with some karma having to do with the amount of dark that you did in the past. And anyone can change at any point in time. It's an action thing between good and evil, and what you choose to do in your progression, and knowing moral code and natural law, and seeing yourself as everything, and not harming others, not stealing from them, not like, and when I say stealing, you could not steal their life, not steal their innocence. It goes into taking and harm. So neutral, and sometimes there's like false light beings or things that make up for the negative action, and they're kind of in between, and they go back and forth. So if it's that's more likely. Usually I don't see neutral beings attaching to people. If they started off negative and then they became neutral, that's also more likely. I have seen beings also sealed inside people, or in prisons, or quarantine realms in their soul or ego or stomach from various things that their previous incarnation may have involved with, which would be positive, negative, neutral, depending on the situation or how they got a spirit in there, if it was of their influence or a being like force possessed them, which is usually not a neutral act. And then sometimes there's beings that protected the planet during like fall of Atlantis, and there's like a spiritual invasion from places like the Antiverse, and there are big powerful beings that are able to capture all those beings, but if you can't send them to hell or a hell realm, a quarantine realm, prison realm, in a way where that realm can contain them. If they can't contain them, then a lot of those beings will know, or the attempt to do that failed, so they have to store them in another way, like sealing them into themselves, which is kind of stupid unless you have to do it, like it's necessary, like you're hired by Earth to do it, and your specific spirits based on who you are and the powerful predator that is being imprisoned if you're like the only one that can contain them, and by spending a certain amount of energy to seal them away and keep them there for a certain amount of time, it's not fun, but sometimes it's necessary, and I see that in people's history sometimes when I read their spirit. I know it would depend on the situation. So if that person is able to ask like what information they got from that neutral spirit, sometimes even beings will pretend to be neutral, but if they're attached to you and they don't give you a good enough reason why they're attached to you, then they might just be pretending to be neutral as well.
That makes sense. And I kind of want to switch gears a little bit to something that we were talking about backstage, for transparency for everyone watching this, is like my last night when I tried to go to sleep and tried to go to Jupiter Station, that I had my memory of everything I did last night blocked. Why would that be done, and was it blocked for a reason?
Okay, so yeah, that's a big topic, and I know you know this kind of stuff. For the crowd, like Jupiter Station is there's multiple stations. It's a big place. There's a lot of moons, but I assume you're talking about the one that's well known in the SSP community for collaboration, trade agreements, and exchange between different races as an easy meetup point. That's well known, and they just say word of mouth. Go to that station near the biggest planet in the solar system. Yeah, I'm not actually. I think I'm not allowed to talk about that live on air. I do read that you have a good intuition on the situation, in which, yeah, there's something that you're not allowed to be made public. You can tune into yourself, though. I believe. Let me read why, if I can. May I read it? I gotta ask for your authority. I won't tell anything that's not supposed to. Can I?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Uh-huh. Huh. What are you using? Oh, wow. 1. Okay. Okay, there is a good reason, but what can I say? 5. Okay, what? Okay, so without giving much away, you want to tune into yourself, and I'll mostly tell you after the show. The reason has to do with something hunting you.
Okay.
And so, like a lot of memory wipes, that I see is because this planet's full of predators, like a big brother scanning people's thoughts to figure out who they are, figure out what they're doing here, their missions, their soul family. And then once a predator figures out enough, it will go back and it will steal abilities, use a bunch to counter everything they did back in time, and essentially make what you did in a mission mute, or it can even disrupt it quite heavily. And some of the beings, if they're visiting you, like I've been visited with memory, quite a few ETs, and they always get attacked right afterwards. So it's not fun for a lot of the ETs visiting us if we remember, because something's scanning our mind, then sells that information to bigger apex predators, or the apex predators actually looking through a puppeted system of whatever is first becoming aware of the information that we're tuning into or whatever, if we're not doing it in a private setting. And then they go after that being quite heavily. There's partially a deterrent to it, but it's mostly a dark predator system on this planet that's retaining King of the Hill, that's keeping everyone locked into a matrix, and it's punishing beings that would interfere with that.
Okay, that makes sense, because I was feeling like it's not that I was blocked from entry, because I feel like there's not many places, honestly, that would block me. Not sounding like, I'm super important or anything, but just with abilities that I have. And so it makes sense, yeah, that it would be that something else. And a protection for those around me, because when I was talking with someone in a reading about, having altars and getting, you know, exposed to all this, my first question to them was, what happens to the families and loved ones when the altar disappears? And they had to pause for a second and go, I've never thought about that. And I was like, yeah, and I'm wondering, because I do think about that, if that makes the altars timelines more real, or that they're bleeding over and I'm just attuned to them without being aware of what they are.
Okay. Are you talking about like when you have an altar for a version of yourself that's goes off and interacts and can even have a family or a relationship? Is that what you mean?
Right. Doing like a 20 and back or 40 and back. It has this life, gets married, has a family, but then when the mission's done, they say the altar is deactivated. So I'm like, well, what happens to the families?
Hmm. Well, it depends on the family. If it's a human family, and where it depends on where you met them. Like, if you met them in the projects, they don't have much. Oh, if they're like a slave, or they're contracted, or if they're low rank, or even if they're high rank, uh, altars are usually not. Well, depends on what happened, like to why they would be deactivated. But if they're needed, and they're useful, and there's no real reason to deactivate them, then they keep going. Even if they might not be active, but they could be recalled at any time if they're needed. If they're, I don't know, wounded, even then, like there's so much technology nowadays that the military, future versions especially, have, to where they could heal a person. And so when you say like not active anymore, I usually see that as they went through so much that they're either not useful anymore when that altar switches to it. So they have to make another one and compress that. And then the person in this 3D has to deal with all that PTSD or something, and then go through a bunch of healing journeys, or die, or which might be why they would stop, which is if they see in the timeline, if they use it too much, that they might kill the main branch, or they get the person to commit suicide, which can happen. So I think that's what you mean. If what happens to other people, I mean, they do their thing. Sometimes they're going through the same stuff that you would be if they're taken from Earth. If they're another ET, they might still visit you, and they can tell, depending on the advancedness of the spirituality of the species, they can telepathically communicate with you. Sometimes you get visited on like Father's Day or your birthday or something like that. So there's things I see, but again, they can't interfere with this timeline. So it don't, some people fall in love with those. I kind of see it like if you're in projects and you're there long enough and you get lonely, you have to kind of make a family. And since you're having multiple of them in different places and sometimes different planets, it's hard to be monogamous. So sometimes they have to have their section of reality and family stay in that. And it depends on the advancement and their ability to communicate with you or visit you. But otherwise, sometimes you get cut off.
Yeah. And it's interesting. And Fast Ed says, what are you talking about in simplest terms possible? And I would have to say, to me, the simplest term possible is we're talking about being a part of the secret space program and been split into alters, running different timelines against our will. And I'm wondering, is there a simpler way to describe this, or is that pretty much as simple as it gets?
What, like when you're temporal dilated at different points in your timeline, and they branch off, and you can see a history of them going in a pattern of places, and then back in? What do you mean?
I think what he's talking about is we keep saying alters, and he's trying to understand what we mean by our alters and being used. And so I was trying to think of the simplest way to explain what an alter is to someone who's not familiar with the programs.
Sure. You can get a book called Symphony of Selves that describes the science that's gone into the evidence of alters. There's a lot of mainstream skepticism that goes into pretty much suppressing all the interesting aspects of our consciousness in humanity by governments paid to do that, including abilities. So everything you go into this topic, you gotta go through a mud of jerks that just want you to be disempowered and think you can't do anything, even if you're experiencing it. So alters are alter personalities. It is a spectrum of different intensity for this. They can come in light forms to heavy forms, and heavy being like DID and dissociative identity disorder, where you can't, the alter personality is what is a part of the soul branches the mind and consciousness, and that branches off the ego. The ego is a survival mechanism that compartmentalizes trauma and things that we need to deal with but can't deal with at the moment later. And so this mechanism is either being abused or used as a way to compartmentalize data, history, emotions, personality, skills, abilities, talents, interactions with a faction of military. Usually they use alter-based, trauma-based mind control to fracture the consciousness, and then program it with machines that they can mind control into to use certain abilities that they've trained the person in. If it's natural, it can be a bleed over of like a past life archetypal personality, or archetype in our mind, like, there's people that are actors will know this really well, where when they go into a role, they have to immerse themselves into being a cowboy or a scientist or a soldier or something, and then they make a aspect of their consciousness and they program it, and they can get good at switching in and out of that personality. Sometimes they're like immersed in it to an entire degree, like Jim Carrey or other people that are in it all the time. They don't exit it, and they wake, sleep, eat with that personality to get immersed into the role. And sometimes it can be a when you need it type of thing, like in a survival situation. It will spur abilities that come online, and a lot of the military uses this in their projects of like torture and fracturing and doing things that spur survival mechanism to evolve the body to demonstrate an ability, and that comes up as an alter. The soul is a fragile matrix of light and can be fractured, and some beings will steal the parts of them, or it will be compressed away or separate and full of trauma and waiting to be resolved. This can be used, abused, controlled, taken off to a distance by a demon. This is why soul shard retrieval is so necessary, and I do that for people. And then there's various amounts of technology in degrees based on knowledge of this tech, which the military and MK Ultra and mind control projects have gone deep into with our military, the Nazis, and there's many things people can look up about it. And ET groups, and some of those ET groups have shared methods, or they're setting up a project that then has a front or interaction with humans that then also abduct the humans. What else? Oh yeah, and then there's many methods of how to heal it, which is, to break it down, you have to detach the jerks that are attached to the altar, fortress it, heal it, and then love it and integrate it back in, and then observe what are the things on top of it that are preventing it from coming into the conscious mind and integrating in wholeness as one like super altar that's described. And that's the healing process.
All right. We're approaching the end of the hour. Do you have time to go a little bit longer, or?
Sure, if you'd like.
Okay. Then my next question I have is, growing up, I never thought about this, but after our reading, it like popped back in my head and into my memory. And that was, whenever I was growing up, I would be, for the longest time, like maybe like from 6 to preteen, I would be very cautious. Like if I had to blow my nose, I would make sure I threw it away in a specific place. And I was always concerned somebody was wanting to use my DNA or wanting to use me in a way. So it's like, if I got hurt, I was like, don't send me to the hospital because they're going to dissect me and all of this. And, it sounds like an irrational fear, but I'm wondering, was that memories from the programs bleeding through in my mind, like saying, hey, this is out there, be careful?
Let's see. So I could answer that, but like I like to actually look at, you went to specifics. I would say 50% is coming from the projects. Let's see where the others is. Um, 40% the soul, and then a part of your psychic mind that can predict and see parts of the future and different timelines is the last 10%. And yeah, I understand irrational fears and phobias, and I actually track back where they come from, because they have a purpose and reason. even if they're negatively programmed by external force and they're not true and they're false evidence appearing real, which can happen. So you don't want to always take fears as complete fact. But if it's an understanding that comes along with it that's reasonable, and there's reasons for that's like righteous fear, which is not necessarily to just keep you in fear, but to get good at preventative care and avoidance of negative scenarios, which can happen, such as being abducted by doing anything to get attention to that would have more abduction by the military, which would suck, or 23andMe somehow getting bought up by the Chinese government, and then them doing mysterious things with the entire system of blood that has been taken by various people that want to know their genetic history or whatever, or vampires stealing your blood. So there is spiritual ramifications for when a negative force gets your blood or your DNA. It's like a backdoor into your system. So there's like weight that can accumulate on the heart, limitation, stealing of abilities, making of clones I've seen by various ET races, and even offspring or genetically augmented beings, or if they add your like a person like you, your genetics to them, their own species. All this can cause karma and drama and pain to bleed over to you. One time I had when I was first interacting with a bunch of different ETs, I had various grays show up to me. I found out one of them was Zeta Reticula. They have a lot of different factions in their group. I hear frequency going off as I'm talking about them. They're like a offspring branch off of our species, and that goes into the future, a negative timeline where they separated from the planet and went off into space and stopped having a connection to the tree of life of this planet, and then stopped being able to breed, and then went into cloning, and their cloning started breaking down, and then they're going back in time and adding their genetics to us and augmented ways to save their race and their history. and then there's other factions that want to control us and do negative evil shit, and then have their version of their controlled timeline continue as like a human to gray Illuminati type thing. So they got a lot of drama. They're very closed off. Some of them think that their body is like a prison for experience, like their emotional spectrum is very closed off. They're very sonic. Some can do like telekinesis and stuff, but that's through various methods that they gain that ability into their species. And yeah, now I'm like, as I'm talking about them, they're like, I feel some psionic things. Shut up! Don't tell them that. Yeah. They're so they got a lot of drama. They even got paradoxes like high in their being. The reason their emotional body is a lot of them is very shut down is because they would feel tons of emotional pain all the time from all the karma and crap that they're dealing with. And as soon as they asked me for help one time, and as soon as I agreed to, I felt tons of pain come my way. So then I let go of that. I said no and detached from them, and the pain went away. So even if like it's hard to tell if the faction that wants help is even positive, because it didn't seem like they wanted that pain to be thrust upon me, but it's like part of like this karmic entanglement thing with them. So there's various positive, neutral, and the negative factions of yeah, there's some things to worry about when things get your DNA. Or like I had a friend, I didn't give him my DNA that time, but as the example of entanglement, they could even engage you in one of their hybrid programs. Jeez, they're coming at me because I'm saying a lot. Where they're adding their genetics to you either at birth or when you're in the womb or later on there's retro-transposable elements or bacterial phage added ways to change genetics. And even species can light body or intake. Yeah, there's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot of factions targeting me right now for telling this. Okay, yeah, I'll take care of them. No, I'm tracking those back. A lot have to do with Washington D.C. Interesting. Okay, so yeah, let me go back to my subject. I had a friend that was doing a deal with a gray race, and they're just experimenting. And I was trying to warn them like on things, but they didn't. They just went with it. They didn't listen to me. And they're trying to gain abilities or something from the ET race, and they asked what the ET race wanted in exchange, and the ET race said their DNA. And as soon as I heard that, I was like, no, you shouldn't do that. That a lot of beings, I've run into a bunch of beings that want the DNA, but there's a lot of drama with that, so you don't necessarily want to give your DNA as the trading option. There's so many other things you can trade with an ET race if you wanted to that won't harm you back or have backlash or a window back into you to affect. Is why they want that DNA is very it could be ambiguous, and they're not like telling you the real reason. But as soon as she did, they got attacked like crazy afterwards. So then we like uncreated it and went back in time and prevented them from getting the DNA. So it's not an irrational fear. I try not to go get my blood taken or anything like that either, because like a lot of weird military equipment would probably get flagged if they got my DNA. Same with you.
All right, and I did the ancestry.com, and what was interesting is because my parents did as well, and there was a section of DNA on my chart that did not belong to my parents on either side. It's like there was a region of DNA, an area, and we always would laugh about that and going, it must be further back than, they realize, or could it be that, we stumbled onto something that was, not meant to be discovered and unexplained? Why I have a different regional DNA than my parents.
So that's rare that they would even show that on the form. They usually just cover up anomalies like that and keep it very boxed in. There's a lot of secrets in our genetics that these companies won't. I think they're being threatened to not allow it out, depending on the country. You're not even allowed to get a genetic test in like places, certain countries too, unless it's like very specific purposes, and you're not even allowed the certain information. So that's cool that they were even letting that through. Yeah, there's a lot of anomalies like that. I read with people. There's rare things in our genetics that they won't talk about, and they don't even exactly know how to scan for that information. And I don't think they would even make it much public. It'd be very rare. So I'm hoping there's less of a monopoly on genetic testing and equipment and scanning and analyzation. There are military technologies that are really advanced, and ET groups that have this, and things that have been traded to different factions of the military that can scan DNA really powerfully and with great information. Like some military said, like everything in your media, we've already have in underground bases in technology, similar to that movie. No, it's a video game, Assassin's Creed, that will go into like scanning through DNA and then bringing it up in a hologram of memory, because most genetics is held as memory information. So if you, depending on like where it's an introduction layer, in the genetic line. Like, it sounds like you said it was introduced when you're being formed in the womb, kind of thing, like inception. So it's inception or at different periods in the womb. They're not going to actually tell you that. It's probably just going to be around that time. So yeah, there's various ways to do this. Either genetic augmentation, where the military will take the mom and then imprint DNA while you're in the womb. ETs will do that too. Sometimes there's a whole cocktail of genetics, or a fact. I've seen it where it's very advanced, where it has to do with the plan and agenda of the person, if it's a positive faction doing it or negative, and sometimes they're combined together as like in one introduction, which is interesting, which would be a balance of both light and dark genetics, having to do with time travel, that the future faction that's visiting or abducting the mother, adding the genetic introduction, is aware of the person you or that person would become in the future, and they're giving them either everything they need, or if it's a dark faction doing it, trying to suppress the person or steal from them, or as an attachment kind of parasite thing. Sometimes it's, you know, the various factions coming together for a reason in remedy for all those species, because as a person heals or grows or evolves or ascends, everything in their genetic line gets resolved and goes along with in the healing journey with them. There's a lot of the sub reasons for beings adding their genetics to us in the first place, and the ways they do it, and at periods in time they do it, as well as to save a species. Some are near extinct, and there's rare genetics and rare relic species, mythological creatures that are in some of the humans' genetics lines passed down. You can read when it's introduced, and there's a whole story behind that. Some that has to do with like them being in that species, incarnating in their soul family, trying to restore the species into existence, because as we heal, we're like the cure that can bring near extinct species or near extinct species back into existence as well. There's also something I call womb jumping, which is when there can also be bilocated birth, where your spirit is being split and forked into multiple bodies and being birthed, and it could be in multiple humans or another species, to have an effect with the shared spirit consciousness, like a show on Netflix called Sense8, where you have multiple simultaneously existing selves around the planet. Or like I was saying before, womb jumping, where the fetus, depending on the situation, it could be one fetus or two, and some fetus could be replaced, like how they say with changelings, with the Fae belief, or it's just one fetus. That's the fetus can be taken from a different womb to a different womb, and some of those wombs will be ETs, to get the genetics of a maybe a soul family member that was involved, that's like adding their genetics for a specific purpose, that has greater awareness of the future, as well as a heart connection forming with you know, what people would call your ancient off-world or ET, or high spiritual mother or father. There could also be like with the womb jumping thing, where let's say this, yeah, they can get certain abilities. Some women will report feeling pregnant as well, and then the fetus goes away. And sometimes they have dreams. I've had have sessions with clients where they say they felt like they were pregnant, and then they had a dream of an ET, and it said that they're either taking it or they're birthing it off world, so it's safe, or there's various reasons for it, so that the rare genetics, our rare genetics is very valuable, so it like makes whole motivations for why this exists in the first place. And then the ET species raises that child off planet, and we can have telepathic communication with them.
Yeah. So to clarify, how I found it was they give you a Venn diagram, and it breaks down, where each one is. And so I did my parents, I did mine, and that's when I discovered, wait a minute, there's a region that's not attached to either parent. And so, yeah, they didn't call it out. I actually discovered it by doing scientific research of looking into where each was, what aspects I got from which side. But as you're talking about having different versions walking around, it reminds me that when my mom had hurt her shoulder, I had to go to the store to pick up her clothes. And when I walked in the door, all of them, they knew me from being there with my mom, and they go, "Oh, you're back." And I said, "What do you mean I'm back?" And they said, "You were here 10 minutes ago." And I was like, "I just got here." So, do you think that could be that there is an alter of me, like that close? And is that paradox of, you can't meet yourself or a different version of yourself, just a fake program?
Oh man, I'd have to scan into that specific event to be more accurate with it. But if I were to like make a possibility, yeah, that's totally possible. It could be an alter, it could be a temporal dilated self, it could be a doppelganger, it could be the person's mind themselves might be going through something psychically, or the very act of that weird thing happening is an attempt to get your attention. Like, I know people that have recognized me somewhere and like say, "Hey, weren't you here?" I'm like, "No, what?" And then I'm like super confused, and I'm trying to get to the bottom of it. It's really weird. And then I have friends that also say that their friend they met remembers an entirely different version of them too, and they try to see and scan into that, and the way that they're described is an entirely different career path they took, and then we look into it, and then it branches off of a period in time when they decided they could have done that. So it's like another timeline version of them being seen as well, and then bleeding over and collapsing into this timeline, and then being remembered. And it, the reality trying to let certain people remember, so that they see that there's more than just what we're locked into in this matrix. So yeah, there could be a bunch of things with that, but I'd have to read into it more.
And it's interesting you said the word doppelganger, because the ladies behind the counter, that's what they called it. They said, "Your doppelganger was here then." And I was like, I had never really heard that term. It's like I described like that. It's like I knew, of body double or, that, but I'd never really paid attention to the term doppelganger. And so I went home and was looking it up. I was like, oh my God, could that, does that mean there? And it even got me thinking of going, if I'm the good doppelganger, does that make the one that I just missed the bad one? Or is there no such thing as balance like that with the doppelgangers?
I wouldn't say there's specific rules that like box it in. Depending on what a doppelganger is, like its origin, is it like a clone? Is it a secret twin? Is it somebody that has a mask, like the CIA has hyper realistic masked version of people? Is it some random person that is on the planet that they found as a facial recognition match of you, or at least close enough? So the government does this where they go around seeking people that look like certain politicians, and they hire them to be body doubles so that they can not get assassinated. It could be you in another altar, and there could even be time travel involved, depending on the place you're going into, why, people you're interacting with. Is there something secret going on in that area? And is it a glitch, like where they did it by accident? Because a lot of factions that do things like that in abduction don't want you to know or realize about it, or is it an attempt to let that bleed through so that you observe it? Like sometimes people will get visited or abducted, and something important will happen. Either sometimes they wake up with marks on them, or injection marks, or parts of their skin taken out in triangles or little shapes or something. And sometimes, like I at least have a plan where I either marker myself or scratch the shit out of myself right before I come back, so that I get a big scratch mark, and it's like, where did that come from? And like some people will do that. So they get an attention grabbing thing, and they can tune into it, and then sometimes it goes to the abduction scenario to bring you to attention to something.
Well, this feels like it's a good spot to end this episode, and we can continue on with another episode. We'd love to have you back on. And I love that I just said we, because I'm the only one here.
Well, your symphony of selves, right?
I know. It's like I was just thinking, like, yeah, all my altars are like saying, yeah, bring him back, bring him back.
Thanks, I appreciate it, all of you.
So,
yeah,
where can people find you and find what services you offer?
Yeah, so I help people unlock their dormant abilities, and I heal people, and I got well known for healing pain from a distance, any type of pain, and trapped emotions, trauma. I help suicide victims, all kinds of scenarios. I love problem solving. I'm on PsionicLeague.com, and you can apply for either cheap or a full session or a full consultation, and you can contact me if you're tight on cash. I can work with you on things with that. And I'm also on YouTube under Psionic League, and on Facebook under Sean Bond, various other social medias as well. You can contact me in those places by email. And I got a bunch of procs on the membership site that teach you abilities, and also on my YouTube there I collect video evidence of people demonstrating superhuman abilities. So if you watch those, you can download the blueprint emitted by their light biophotons, and then your subconscious will unpack it, and then learn the to-do list will unpack your consciousness to eventually learn it yourself. So I recommend people going through those. But yeah, contact me if you want a consultation, if you want to learn about your SSP experiences, or visitations, or abductions, or targeting. I'm really good at healing and getting rid of targeting off people, and helping them unlock their greatest self. How can people reach you?
They can reach me from my link tree, and that has all the links of my show channels and my website, and you can find me on Facebook, Michael Newcoff. And yeah, you actually got me smiling, because nobody's ever asked me where I could be found on my show. So that was great. Thank you for that.
Reciprocity. I appreciate you. And I'll put it on my channel too later, and then so people can reach.
All right, I'll send it to you. Yeah, I'll send you my link tree. And
nice. Thanks.
I put in the description the breakdown that you gave me from your site of all your reading styles, so they they have access, they can read that. And I put your website, and I believe I put your Facebook. I may have put your YouTube as well in the description. So
Thank you. I appreciate it.
you're welcome.
Yeah, and I'll also be doing events and workshops and meditations for people, and I do sacred tour trips. I just got back from Egypt to help people connect to the place of power there that grants graces and abilities for people, the temples and the pyramids, and really cool, and the gods there. And I will probably be doing more all around the world, and I think next Mexico for the various pyramids, because that will be easiest. And then there's other places calling me, of course, as well. So feel free to message me if you're interested in getting granted superhuman abilities from various places of power on the planet, and have a great experience there that will spiritually unlock you and heal you and have tremendous unfoldment of your multidimensional self, and unique experiences you can't get anywhere else as well.
Very cool. And I know we're at the end and everything, but Lala Bright actually just popped in at the last second. This question that I hear a lot about, and I am curious your thoughts on is, do you feel O negative bloodline people are targeted a lot more than others?
Yes. My mom has that. Even if you're not expressing that self as your main blood type, you can inherit it. And it will be like dormant, but still in the lineage. It's a lot. There's a lot going on with it. If you're talking about Rh negative, rhesus, and the Basque people, and the connection to the royal family, and different types of ETCs. This is like 300 lineages combined together with that lineage. So it's not just one. And the various intuitions people have about her, I've heard, are somewhat true, as they can fit into that 300. And there's like a war going on over control over it. It usually means like there's some abilities that are flourishing more than others in certain people, but if you got it really pure and sacred and safe and detached, you can get more abilities coming out of it. One of the more overpowered races that connects to it is a infrared dragon that grants abilities in infrared portal technology, in being able to open energetic portals to draw in infrared energy, which this reality is very permeant with, so you can transmute that into magic. There's a closed loop connection in telepathy, in a communication system, and there's various things trying to tap into that. There is the royal family trying to hack into it, so there's a lot of chaos with that, trying to steal energy from people. So that's one of the things you gotta detach from and quarantine out of your lineage. It can be very powerful in magic and abilities, but if you're not taking care of things and you're not being spiritual hygienic, it can be a chaos tornado in a person's life. And there's many other abilities and connections into that besides what I mentioned that are more secret.
Very cool. And before I play the outro, I like to ask guests this one last question, and that is, from your life experience, what is a golden nugget that you would love to leave the listeners with?
There's so much. God, I gotta narrow it down. Let's see. Love conquers all. Hug yourself. Go inward into your heart. Let go of everything that's not you. Become your true self. Let go of the false self. Be what you want to become, and remind yourself to become that more and more every day, as you're understanding what you don't want to be. And things will unfold more and more as you do that naturally and detach from what shouldn't be there anymore. And in you is your greatest self, your purest self. The version of you that you want to become is already existing in your heart. So getting very detached from the external world and giving yourself enough time and going inward in a very comfortable manner is super powerful and will change your life dramatically. I recommend the bath, or you surround yourself with things that can comfort you to where you let go of everything and you just can completely relax and enjoy into yourself and nourish and love yourself like crazy, and things will open up faster and faster in that space of safety.
Wow, that was awesome. I don't even know how to top that.
Thank you.
All I can say is I would add is, yeah, just as Sean said, with everything he said, fill each day with love and, give yourself time to process things and don't beat yourself up over things. That remember, life is choices. And so if one choice didn't work out, you can choose to change it to another choice. So thank you, Sean, for this wonderful episode. Thank
Thank
you
you.
to the chat group. And we are going to say good night, good day, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Blessings to you all. Thank
Blessings to
you.
you all. Thank you for coming. Honored. Love you all. Thank you for having me on, Michael.
Thank you for coming.